You all for coming out here tonight. Again, I'm Faran Savitz. I'm the Zero Waste Advocate with PennEnvironment. If you're not familiar with us, we're a statewide environmental nonprofit. We believe everyone in Pennsylvania deserves clean air, clean water, a safe and livable climate. If you can't hear me at all during the presentation, just yell at me to speak up or hold the mic closer to me or something. I'll try and keep what my overview is pretty brief. I'll talk about what our zero waste program is at PennEnvironment, why we're focusing on single-use plastics, some of the problems with plastic, and then some of the solutions that are available in Pennsylvania. So to start off, the way we think about waste is that we live in what we call a throwaway society. Essentially, throughout America, speak into it better. All right, got it. So in America, and especially in Pennsylvania, we use a lot of stuff. And a lot of the stuff we use gets thrown out after just a couple of minutes of use. If you think about it, it's items like a plastic bag, a bag of chips, a candy wrapper. It goes even further though. Most of the items that we use in our daily lives, you use them, and then when we're done with them, you throw it out, and you sort of forget about it. You don't think about where that waste goes. But honestly, in America, we're responsible for about 12% of all the trash in the world, despite only having 4% of the world's population, which is crazy. We just create an outsized amount of the waste that is here in the world. The reason we focus on plastic specifically for our zero waste program, because there are a lot of types of waste out there beyond the plastic, but we focus on plastic because it is everywhere and in so many things. And I just want to start by sharing what plastic is, just to sort of make that pretty clear. I have a very sciencey definition up on the slides there. I'm not really going to talk about plastic in those terms, but if you're curious, it's there for you. But essentially, plastic is synthetic. It's human-created material, and it comes in a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. Generally, we think about plastic being like a plastic bag or a piece of styrofoam. But the things we put plastic into go much further than that. There's PVC pipes. There's vinyl, which is a form of plastic. A lot of our clothing is made from synthetic textiles. Those are all plastic too. If you think about polystyrene, the styrofoam, a lot of our car tires are made of synthetic rubber. That's a form of plastic too. All these products you see in the images on the screen, those are different types of plastic products. We use them throughout our daily lives without really thinking about it. And one of the things about plastic is it's durable. It sticks around, it keeps its shape. It lasts. It's hard to get rid of. And so that runs into a lot of problems because if plastic is in so many things and we're using a lot of it and it doesn't really go away that easily, we're left with a lot of plastic over time. Most of the plastic that we have in our lives right now was created in the past 50 years. The vast majority of plastic out there was created in the last 50 years. Which is crazy to think about too, that these are relatively recent in our lives, in the environment, and so we're still finding out ways of dealing with them. So why is plastic a problem? Well, one of the big ways we think about plastic being a problem is as a threat to our wildlife. We use so much plastic, so obviously a lot of it's going to end up in our environment. Every year, Americans generate about 35 million tons of plastic waste. Less than 6% of that waste gets recycled. So the rest of that 35 million tons is going to a landfill, it's going to an incinerator, or it's going straight into the environment. Because we create so much, because we consume so much, and because plastic is durable and it lasts, a lot of it is going to find its way to our rivers, our streams. It finds its way to our oceans. I'm sure we've all seen images like some of these on the screen. A bird wrapped in plastic. A whale washing up with plastic in its stomach, a turtle with a straw up its nose. Plastic poses a direct harm to our wildlife. They might mistake it for food, so they'll eat it and can choke on it. It can block their airways. It can stop them from finding actual food, disrupt breeding patterns, harm their ability to migrate. The list sort of goes on and on and on with harms to wildlife. Plastic also contains chemicals, and so when our wildlife eats the plastic, it's consuming those chemicals too. And we often think about it as an ocean problem. Some studies suggest that by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean by weight than fish, which is crazy that fish will be outweighed by plastic in the next couple of decades, simply because we create so much and it ends up eventually in our oceans. And you may be thinking, Pennsylvania, we don't really have an ocean bordering us, but Pennsylvania is an upstream source for our oceans. The Delaware River watershed eventually flows into the ocean. The Chesapeake Bay, we're a big part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So a lot of our waterways in Pennsylvania will ultimately end up in the ocean. But also, we create a lot of plastic in our state, and we use a lot of plastic. And some of it might get shipped overseas where it ends up in our oceans. Some of it might get shipped elsewhere where it ends up in our oceans. Or we create plastic products that get shipped elsewhere, and it can end up in our oceans, harming wildlife. But it is also, plastic, a harm for other types of wildlife too, not just the marine. It can harm our freshwater ecosystems. Studies increasingly find plastic in the bellies of fish in the Susquehanna, or the Delaware River, or all our other rivers, lakes, and streams. And I'll go a bit more into that in a little bit. But it goes beyond the harms to wildlife, though. Plastic is also a problem for our infrastructure. It's also a problem for our wallets. 9 of Pennsylvania's largest cities every year collectively spend close to $70 million on litter cleanup and abatement. And in Pennsylvania, plastic is the most prevalent form of litter. If it's that much of a problem for our biggest cities who have the most resources, it is certainly a problem for our smaller communities, the ones who have less of an ability to deal with the problem, who don't have the staffing infrastructure, who don't have as big waste departments, or the services already there. So it adds up, and those costs are eventually borne by taxpayers. Litter itself is especially difficult to clean up, and whose job is it to clean up our roadside litter? Well, it falls on PennDOT, funded by taxpayer dollars, and on our local communities, our cities, our townships, our boroughs. Plastic bags especially can be pretty harmful to our infrastructure. They clog our sewer grates, our stormwater infrastructure. So when we experience heavy rainfall and flooding, the events of which we're seeing more and more frequently, heavy rainfall events are getting more frequent year over year. We're seeing more and more floods every single year. As we see more and more of those, and plastic bags clog our stormwater infrastructure, either the damage from that flooding becomes greater and greater, or we have to spend more and more time, effort, and resources cleaning those storm grates. Philadelphia's water department estimates that plastic bags double the cost of maintaining their stormwater infrastructure, which is crazy that they have to spend so much time just unclogging the sewer grates of plastic that we don't really need because we have easy, sustainable alternatives. So moving on, another harm with plastic is that it comes from somewhere, and that somewhere is fossil fuels. Traditionally, plastic was made from petroleum. More and more, plastic has been made from natural gas, fracked natural gas extracted right here in Pennsylvania. So plastic is not just a problem with its waste. We think of it as being a sort of cradle-to-grave problem. From the moment we extract that natural gas in Pennsylvania, we're causing harm to our air quality, our climate, our water quality, and our wildlife. When we create the plastics, it's a heavily polluting process. And then when we have to get rid of the plastic and deal with the waste, again, it's polluting, it's dirty, it harms our wildlife, it harms our ecosystems, it harms our health. So it's not just a problem with the waste, it's a problem with creating the plastic too. Fracking is very bad for our environment and our health. And so this isn't really a question of plastics and climate or how does plastics play into climate. Our use of single-use plastics is driving part of the climate crisis too. It is impacting the carbon we put into the atmosphere. And so to another problem with plastics is microplastics. You may have heard this term in the news or read about it. Essentially, plastic doesn't really go away. It just breaks down into tinier and tinier pieces of plastic. And when it becomes about the size 5 millimeters in any dimension, the size of a grain of rice maybe, or a hair, that's called a microplastic. A lot of these are the broken down remnants of larger pieces of plastic. They could be from plastic bags. They could be from styrofoam. They could be from our synthetic clothing, creating microfibers in our environment. Up on the screen here are a bunch of different images of microplastics from testing we've done at PennEnvironment. So those are pictures I took of different plastics, microplastics, we found in our environment. Scientists have found microplastics all around the world. They're on Mount Everest. They're in the deepest parts of the ocean. They're in remote climates. They're in cities. They're in the air. They're in our food. They're in our water. At PennEnvironment, we've tested over 100 to date, over 100 rivers, lakes, and streams all around Pennsylvania for these microplastics. We found microplastics every single place that we've tested. We started off with 53 of the more high profile, more visible waterways in the state, the Delaware River, the Schuylkill. We tested Neshaminy Creek just north of here at Tyler State Park. We've tested all these waterways and we found microplastics in every single one. So we then went out and tested 50 of the cleanest, most pristine waterways in the state. The exceptional value, the high quality, and the Class A trout waterways. We thought, all right, it's in a lot of our waterways, but is it in the best ones? The ones that have to hit certain criteria for watershed protection, for pollutants, for water quality. And unfortunately, we found microplastics in every single one of those exceptional value, high quality, and Class A streams and rivers all around the state. On here is a map of the first project we did. I'll include a link at the end with all the testing we've done, but it's extremely worrying, but also not surprising given the volume of plastic we create. And those microplastics have health impacts. There's a lot of research being done right now on what microplastics are doing to wildlife and what they're doing to humans. But some studies suggest that every week, just by living our lives, we eat, we breathe, and we drink in about 5 grams of microplastics, which is about the weight of a credit card or a single-use plastic bag. Just from living your life, you're ingesting a plastic bag every week, which obviously it should not be in our bodies, and it is doing harmful things to us when it's in there. I mentioned before, plastic contains chemicals. A lot of these chemicals are built into plastics, things that make them softer or color them. They can make them water repellent, make them keep their shape, make them change their shape. But microplastics especially sort of act like sponges in our environment. They attract pollutants that are already out there, and those move up the food chain. Our microorganisms consume them, and then larger organisms consume them, and who sits at the top of the food chain? But us, humans. So we're ingesting all these microplastics that have worked their way up, along with the chemicals they've attracted along the way. It can be things like PCBs, DDT, PFAS, all sorts of chemicals, heavy metals, that have severe health impacts on humans. Plastics and the chemicals in them and microplastics have been linked to certain types of cancer. They've been linked to reproductive disorders. A lot of these chemicals are considered endocrine disruptors, so they can cause all sorts of issues with birth defects and reproduction. A recent study found that just a few of the chemicals included in plastic cost the healthcare system around $250 billion every year, which is a staggering amount of money that is from people getting sick from the plastic we use in our daily lives. So what do we do about it? Well, one of the solutions we're always taught is recycling. Reduce, reuse, recycle, right? The 3 R's. And recycling is a great tool to address a lot of our waste, just not always plastic. Because the problem really is not all plastic is recyclable. You look at it and you see that little number with the chasing arrows on it and you think, oh, that means I can put it in my single stream recycling. But unfortunately, that number just sort of tells you what the plastic is. It's not telling you it can be recycled. Each number is a different type of plastic. Often, plastics labeled with the number 1 or 2 can be recycled. Also, plastics labeled with the number 5. The rest of them, it really depends on who's collecting your waste. I know in Middletown, Waste Management does the recycling, and they can collect 1 through 5, but not number 6, which is polystyrene. Polystyrene, really difficult to recycle. Plastic bags, almost impossible to recycle. If you put it in your single stream recycling, chances are it's going to get either sorted out, which takes time and resources and makes the whole recycling process more difficult, or something like a plastic bag might function like hair in your vacuum cleaner. It'll clog up the rollers and the sorting equipment, making it really difficult to actually recycle what could have been recycled in the single stream. So either the whole process becomes more costly, more time intensive, and more difficult to do, or all that waste is going to get diverted to a landfill or an incinerator. So not all plastic can be recycled. It makes recycling what there is very difficult. Things that can be recycled definitely should go in there and are great. But things like a plastic bag or a styrofoam container, anything labeled number 6, should probably not be recycled. So what do we do? If recycling is not the solution with plastic, if plastic is everywhere, if it's in so many different parts of our daily lives, how do we solve this problem? Well, at PennEnvironment, our recommendation is to tackle it from upstream angles. And by that we mean if we cut the pollution off at the source, if we're not creating the plastic, then it can't become waste. If we're not creating the plastic, if it doesn't get to us, it doesn't become waste, we don't need to figure out what to do with it. And we know that upstream solutions work. We've seen them working for decades in other states. There are over a dozen statewide bans on single-use plastics like plastic bags, like styrofoam containers, and other types of items. Many of our neighbors actually have these too: New Jersey, Delaware, New York. They've all done things at the state level to tackle this problem. So we've lagged behind these states, but we've gotten to take lessons from what they've done. We've seen what they did well. We've seen how these go, and so we know this really is the solution. So that's something we've been working on in Pennsylvania. Just a little bit of a landscape, I guess, a timeline about how this has been going in Pennsylvania. The first restriction on single-use plastic at the local level in Pennsylvania happened back in 2018 in Narberth Borough in Montgomery County. And pretty soon after, our state legislature passed a preemption law, a ban on local plastic bans, taking the authority away from our local communities to actually pass this type of legislation. Some communities, like Westchester Borough in Philadelphia, started to pass legislation of their own while this process was ongoing, but generally it halted a lot of the momentum at the local level. We at PennEnvironment and other environmental organizations, along with local leaders in places like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Lower Merion, organized. We filed a legal challenge against the state's preemption. We wrote letters to the legislature saying, this is a local problem. We're dealing with this in our boroughs, in our municipalities, our cities, our townships. So if the state legislature isn't going to be taking action right now, let's make sure at least our local leaders who want to take action can. And at the end of 2021, the legislature allowed that preemption law to expire, and so the authority went back to our townships and our boroughs. And since then, we've sort of seen an explosion in action, so to speak. There are currently 26 total plastic bag ordinances in Pennsylvania. Not all of them cover just plastic bags. Some of them cover polystyrene. Some of them cover plastic straws or utensils. But basically, this is a list of everyone who has taken action so far in Pennsylvania. These 26 laws include our two biggest cities, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. They cover over 18% of our state's population. And when they're all in effect, they could eliminate over 880 million single-use plastic bags per year. That's millions of pounds of plastic waste, about 4,800 tons, 4,800 tons of plastic waste that we're eliminating each year. Plastic waste that would otherwise be landfilled, would get incinerated, or would go straight into our environment as litter. So these are a great thing. They're an actual impactful way that we can take action. I believe 3 of these laws have passed in Bucks County so far: Solebury, Doylestown, and Newtown Township. Doylestown Borough, I should say. Doylestown Borough and Newtown Township. Newtown Borough, just last week or the week before, it was last week, had a preliminary vote on a plastic bag ban of their own, so they could be taking action too. And many more communities all around the state are taking steps to move forward with these laws of their own. We're also working at the state level to tackle some of our waste issues. So ways to fix recycling, ways to make sure we can recycle our electronic products, which are one of the most toxic parts of the waste stream, to tackle composting. But it is difficult to tackle these issues at the state level. The legislature is divided. We're working on compromises and bipartisan legislation in both the House and the Senate. I've got just a bunch of bills that we've been working on as part of our Zero Waste for Pennsylvania package, and I can share information on that with anyone who's interested. There's similar efforts going on at the national level with the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which has been reintroduced in Congress for the past couple of sessions. It includes things like a plastic bag ban, like bans on polystyrene, work to combat microplastics, producer responsibility, which is a great tool I can go into more if people have questions about it. But these are just some of the solutions we're pursuing at the state and federal level too. But right now, the most work that is happening to tackle plastic pollution is at the local municipal level. It's where we can have the greatest impact and where we can make an immediate impact, build the momentum, and hopefully someday, get statewide action. So here is some extra info If you want, you can either take a picture of this or I can send these links around to people who are interested, but you can contact me. We have a toolkit of resources on the PennEnvironment website. Those are both for local activists or volunteers who want to take action on plastic, or for elected officials looking for tools of their own. It includes model legislation we developed based on the best practices from all around the state. It includes research we've collected on plastic bag bans and plastic pollution in general. And it includes a list of everyone who has passed one of these laws of their own and information about what they've passed. There's also a link for our information on microplastics. We've done 2 different reports so far. You can see what local Bucks County streams we've done, because we've done a bunch of them. And you can see what microplastics we found. Then there's information on recycling in Pennsylvania. Our sort of cornerstone recycling law in Pennsylvania is called Act 101. It passed in 1988. It celebrated its 35th anniversary just last year. It hasn't really changed in those 35 years, but the types of waste we create have. So we have a report detailing ways we can fix recycling in Pennsylvania and solutions to it, like getting rid of single-use plastics that can't be recycled. And then you can also text PennEnvironment to that number there to join our mobile action network. You can get updates on reports, information, petitions, and actions that we're doing. I can go, when we do question and answer, go into specifics about legislation we recommend, what people have done, and stuff like that. But with that, I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to pass it over to Alisa.
Oh, we have to plug this guy in here.
Yeah, you have to plug the HDMI in the one. I am the comic relief in between the technical issues. What we have, folks, is a survey in the back, on the back table. If you'd be kind enough, I'm going to hand them out during, if you turn, yeah. I'm going to hand them out. We have some pencils. If you'd be kind enough to fill them out and leave them on the back table after you're done, that would be great. Yes, sir. Perfect.
Yeah. We're going to have you repeat the question in the microphone so others can hear it.
Oh. Sorry, man. We didn't get in. Okay. Sorry about that.
So my question is, in looking at your Pennsylvania counties and where you measured plastics in various streams and rivers, you didn't mention where those pristine rivers were, but I'm sort of thinking that they're up in the northwest part of Pennsylvania, Potter County, Clarion, Venango, Warren, because I didn't see any green circles up in that area except for Erie. So would that indicate that the water is better? And if so, is that part of the population doing a better job than we are here?
So the image of the map I had in the slides was from our first project, so none of the exceptional value, high quality ones we tested are on that map. That's a different map that's on our website, so you can check that out too. Our project was not to compare waterways to see who's doing better or worse. It was just to say, here are 50 of the cleanest, best streams in the state, and we're going to see if there are microplastics, because these are the best. They have to hit the highest quality standards. And we found plastic in all of them. It didn't really matter where they were. There were some in Bucks County. There were some in remote reaches of the state, in state parks, in forests, in very remote areas with no one around. So it doesn't really matter if there's visible litter, if there's a large population, if there's a small population. Microplastics are small enough to sort of travel around. They work their way through our watersheds. They get carried by the air. So I can certainly share with you that other map that has the exceptional value and high quality, and you can take a look at where we tested, but you could also take a look and test other streams yourself if you were curious. Does that sort of answer the question? Okay. We can go more into it later, but we'll do the next presentation first.
Great. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
We have one more question.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned that plastic bags create an issue in the recycling dominion. Supermarkets have receptacles for plastic bags. How do those get recycled?
An excellent question. I'd love to know the answer to that. The short answer is not all of them do. So the collections at supermarkets or other retailers, from the business's side of things, they just collect it and it goes elsewhere. And that's them doing their due diligence, doing their part of the process. The problem with plastic bags is partly A, you need specialized equipment to recycle them, and B, it's very expensive to recycle them, and you don't get a very high quality product out of it, and it's much cheaper to make new plastic. So it doesn't make economic sense to try and recycle the plastic bags. So investigations have shown that a lot of the plastic bags getting put in these drop-off locations end up in landfills, they end up incinerators, they get shipped overseas. They don't actually get recycled. ABC News did a good piece on it last year. Our partner group in California did similar research on Amazon packages that say return to these drop-off locations, and also found the vast majority don't get recycled. So the drop-off locations, it would be great if they were getting recycled. The reality is most likely not, and a lot of them have actually been shut down since that ABC investigation happened. So it's certainly not a solution. Even if they were getting recycled, it would still be better to get rid of the plastic because we have better alternatives, and so we wouldn't need to try and figure out some way to get rid of them.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, everybody. My name is Alisa Sharagorodsky. My background is in solid waste prevention strategies. It's very nice to be here today to talk to you all. I've done this with Faran a few times in a couple different places, so I've kind of tailored my presentation to not keep saying the same thing to you, and to maybe take a little bit of a different approach and a different angle to the topic of waste reduction. Something that's quite intimidating to most of us, right? Everything is plastic, everything out there is plastic. We're not going to do this perfectly, but we have to start somewhere. So I'd like to start with land acknowledgements. I always try to do this. So right now we're acknowledging the Lenape land that we stand on, because I am not compensated for my time to come here today. If anybody here is inspired, you can scan this, and you can donate directly to the Lenape community of Pennsylvania. And I'll pull this up afterwards too, so this money will go to this organization. So something that I wanted to say here is that we're not going to get here by making some giant stride overnight. This is a lot of people doing the right thing over an extended period of time, and that's the only way that we're going to change the tides. So it requires everybody here, and thank you for attending this event, because the fact that you're here shows that you care enough about this topic to make the trip here and to think about it and make respective actions. So something that we want to acknowledge, and Faran talked about this at length, is that our biosphere cannot possibly handle the amount of waste that we're generating, right? Everything that we make has to be managed. Everything that we talk about with waste is always from the mitigation perspective. We're always only mitigating waste. Everywhere. The idea of compostables also requires mitigation. The idea of recycle requires mitigation. We spend a lot of resources moving garbage around. And most of our garbage in Pennsylvania goes to incinerators. So in case you didn't know that, we're burning our garbage. We're burning them in neighborhoods that are often marginalized neighborhoods with colored people who suffer terrible consequences from our actions. So we should be aware that it's not just because we put it to the curb and it goes somewhere and it gets recycled. No, this has long-term ramifications for generations to come. So our mission is to stop trash where it starts. We work mostly with B2B, we work with businesses, we help provide guidance to organizations, municipalities on how do we stop the trash before it gets created. And there's many methods to doing this. We are a 501c3. And just to give some insights on some of the work that we do, our systems at work include a focus on reuse. So rather than mitigation, our focus is on building reusable infrastructure. We do this by amplifying circularity. We make observations of where trash is being generated, and we replace those systems with reusable models. And sanitation. So we connect our partners with industrial sanitizing processes in Philadelphia. Luckily enough, we just had Redish, which is a company that can process up to 100,000 units. That means sanitizing them in a commercial dishwasher that's like bigger than this room. They can do 100,000 units a day. So that's like when we think about a big place like the Lincoln financial field and all of the plastic that they're generating every day, we could be creating reusable systems within those models. So right now, currently, we have several pilots going in grocery stores. We're in 4 grocery stores. We've circulated 30,000 containers for those grocery stores this year. The way that we do that is we work directly with those markets. We work with multiple departments in those marketplaces. We work with them to retrofit their POS system to incorporate a deposit model so that their customers can have access to a container refund program. So if, say you go to your grocery store and you really wanted to buy a pre-made chicken salad. Right now, the way you buy it in a deli round, you use it up, and then it ends up going into your recycling stream. We offer reusable containers. Our customers pack out those products in reusable containers. The customer pays a $2 deposit on that container. They use it up, they bring it back to the market, we sanitize it, and keep that item in circulation so that it never enters the waste stream. We also are targeting special events, things like beer gardens. So one of the studies that we currently did in Philadelphia, there's a pretty big partner, we're not gonna mention their names, but this one big partner has 2 beer gardens. They generate 7,000 single-use cups a week across 2 beer gardens in 2 different areas of the city. So by us working with them to create a reusable system, within 5 years, just at these 2 beer gardens, we'll keep 1 million single-use cups from being generated. And also, they will see ROI after 3 years. So this is an infrastructure that they're investing in. It does cost more money than buying a boatload of plastic. They invest in it just like you would invest in your building or just like you would invest in a work vehicle. It's the same principle. You need this to do business. So they invest in their internal reusable infrastructure, and then over time it pays for itself. And we also are constantly looking and connecting, like if anybody in this room is really interested in this, we're always looking for investors, we're always looking for sponsors to sponsor these types of programs. So, we're always asking, like, please spread the word about this if you can. Another thing that we've done in past years, a big win for us, we worked with the Philadelphia Health Department with our friends at Circular Philadelphia. Initially, Pennsylvania in our food code does have a variance for reuse. But the Philadelphia Food Code was like a little bit, they weren't sure how to apply it to food service establishments, so they were charging food service establishments $250 each establishment had to pay to be able to utilize this variance, which is kind of illegal because it's already in our food code. So we worked with them to remove that cost so businesses could enter for free, and we worked with their all of their sanitarians, so all the health department folks who are going out to the businesses to do their evaluations, to help kind of prime them on what does a reusable system look like. And we generated this quick start guide for all businesses can have access to this quick start guide to understand how to establish a reusable model within their company. So if this is something that you guys are interested in, I have a mailing list over here. If you put your email address on it, I'll email you and I'll send this to you so you guys can share it amongst your business community. Also, Ecosystems works with Upstream Solutions, an international organization. We sit on their committee for legislative committee, so we actually are members for the Conference for Food Safety. We worked to bring our knowledge to this new documentation for the food code. So the food code gets written every 4 years, and up until now, reuse has never been in the food code. I mean, it should have been, and it may have been long ago, but it hasn't definitely in the past 2 decades. So we want to make sure that as we're establishing reusable models, that these are safe and sanitary, and that there's a structure for it. And there is a national process for reuse being laid out right now by an organization called PR3, and it's like a standard, just like an OSHA standard would be created. It's very similar. So it's for safe handling rules and regs around reuse. And so we kind of work to advise this group on that. So in this township, I did a little bit of digging, and I kind of thought it was interesting. So Environment America, I don't know why it didn't put the whole thing at the bottom there, but basically, if Middletown, for the 45,000 plus residents here, if we were to ban plastic bags, it would prevent more than 13 million, that's annual, 13 million bags from being generated a year. That's just here, just in this one township, so that's huge. So as we're starting to think about it, and as we're starting to bring supervisors to the table around this topic, this is a really big point, right? Because like Faran said earlier, like these are all things that we have to pour money into. It comes out of our tax base to mitigate these things. So by banning it, it takes those funds and can allocate them towards more important things like elder care or fixing our roads or making sure our street infrastructure is right? Like right now, the money that we spend on that can go towards other things that are needed, and that's a really important part that I want to bring up here. And also, I don't know if you folks are interested in learning more about this. Something that I've done, which has been really elucidating on just how big this problem is in Google Alerts, you guys can put in any topic in there. Like if you wanted to learn more about like pet care or anything at all, you can put it in under Google Alerts. So I have 3 alerts set on my phone, and that's PFAS, plastic, and plastic legislation. And so every day I get an alert on my phone that tells me every time something's published to the web about these topics. And just in the past like year, here's some of like what we're seeing here. Chemicals, and also you should all know that there are 1,800 chemicals of concern in plastic. Those are all leaching, not just when you're putting hot drinks, like all those coffee cups that have the liners. When you pour hot stuff in there, all that plastic is leaching into your body. So you should know that. So not just the hormones, but also what it does to our human cells. These things are being trapped in our body, as Faran said, like, with these microplastics, they're everywhere, they're in our water, but also how are these materials impacting poor countries around the world? How is big oil dealing with this, right? Like they know this is coming down. It's raining. It's in our weather system, right? When it rains, there's microplastic in our rain. Everything is still being packed in too much plastic. These are conversations. This is just from the past, year or something that I've been putting it out there. So another thing that I participate in is something called Philly Talks Trash. We have a quarterly publication that we put out all about garbage and plastic. If you're interested in joining our mailing list, we have a few thousand people who are on our mailing list, and we only send out just this quarterly. You can scan this QR code right here and join our mailing list. We always have guest speakers and different people who talk about this topic. And I'll leave this up here in case anybody wanted to scan this, and my email address is here. We also have over here, we're looking for new board members. If anybody's interested, we have a sheet over there that you can learn more about our organization. I'm happy to talk to you more about it. If you might be interested in joining our board, please scan the QR code over there, and there's some other information, or join our mailing list. Can I answer any questions?
Oh, Thank you. Hi. I'm very interested in the data for Middletown Township, and I may not have read it right. I know it's 45,000 people. What did you say about number of plastic bags? I read
I think 13 million, more than 13 million.
Okay, 13 million
Yeah,
for one township.
yeah, they have some kind of formula on this website that, and I don't know, maybe you have more.
Did you want to scroll back to that slide?
Yeah, so that estimate comes from a report done by Environment America and Frontier Group, which is actually PennEnvironment's parent national organization. So we helped put that report together. But the report looked at plastic bag bans all around the country at the state and municipal level, and looked at studies on how they've gone and the plastic eliminated, the impacts on litter, and it created a really cool tool that could create an estimate based on how these have gone elsewhere. How would it go in your community? So these estimates here for Middletown showed that a ban on plastic bags could eliminate that number of plastic bags, 13 million, which when you think about it, if you're shopping once or twice a week, 52 weeks in a year, all the people in the township, that's a lot of plastic bags that add up. It's a lot of oil or natural gas that goes into creating those bags. That's a lot of waste that has to go somewhere. So it sounds like a big number because it is a big number, and it's something we can tackle.
Okay, I have a second question for you about refilleries. There is one nearby. I hope everybody in this room knows about the local
Yardley,
refillery.
the Yardley refillery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any move to get supermarkets to do that kind of thing? Because it needs to be on a grand scale. It's wonderful to have a local refillery. It's expensive, but it's certainly worthwhile. But what is being done, if anything, for the big guys?
Well, I don't know if you guys have heard of Loop Industries. This is a company started by Tom Zaki. He's the founder of TerraCycle. So Loop basically works with bigger corporations like Haagen-Dazs or Procter & Gamble to make reusables available at the shelf level, but they come pre-packed. But it would be a similar circular model where you would use that item, like for example, like Haagen-Dazs ice cream. You can find them not yet everywhere, but in certain locations on the shelf. And you would buy your Haagen-Dazs, and then you would eat your Haagen-Dazs, you would bring it back, they would sanitize it, bring it to the company, refill it, and then I think there's a lot of road miles associated with that, which is a lot different than a refillery. And I do know that like Kroger Industries and a lot of like Giants, they're all at the table. Like when I go to meetings where they're discussing reuse through the national groups, those corporations are in those meetings. They're there, so you know that they're catching on. They know that their model is antiquated and that people are asking for something different. So I do think that it's only a matter of time. But simultaneously, if you think about it, like a lot of grocery stores have the one aisle that has the bulk department that almost nobody uses. So it's like the demand, the lack of demand, because we're so used to grab and go in the linear market, it's hard. We're right now kind of in this interplay between disposability and reuse. So the more people that are going to come to the table about this and talk to your grocery store, if you shop at Acme, like talk to them about this, because if they have more comments in their comment box that says like, we really want reusables and why is everything so plasticky, those corporations collect that data and they share it. So I think that it seems really hard to make steps here and headway, but it's really critical to speak up where you can, because it's obviously not there yet.
It's a little off topic of single use, it would seem, but not really. I'm curious what your thoughts, both of you, are on polyvinyl alcohol, and is that nanoplastics, and are those ever going away? Because it seems even more alarming these days because it's in a lot of environmentally friendly seeming products and things like that.
Yeah, I haven't done too much work on, well, polyvinyl in general, but it is a form of plastic. So it doesn't really go away. We've seen a lot of problems, mainly with PVC, though. Like, if you remember the East Palestine train derailment was carrying a lot of toxic chemicals in Ohio. Those chemicals were coming to Pennsylvania to create PVC, some of the most toxic ones that were spilled in that community. So there are a lot of harmful chemicals associated with it. It still is plastic. There are a lot of products out there that claim to be more sustainable forms of plastic, or like a biodegradable plastic, a compostable plastic. And it can be hard to determine what actually, could I compost in my backyard compost, or what's requires specific industrial scale conditions in order to actually break down. What is going to be good for the environment and what's not. Because a lot of these alternatives out there, the bioplastics, they function like plastic. If you leave it out in the environment, it's going to break down like plastic into microplastics and cause all sorts of harm. And when it comes down to it, it's still a single-use item. So by and large, we're trying to steer away from plastic in general, whether it's compostable, whether it's plant-based, whether it's a traditional plastic. For a lot of items, our best option is going to be a reusable one, something you can bring from home over and over and over again. So that's the real sustainable option. So we try and avoid the alternatives, so to speak, because they have their own host of problems too.
Yeah, I can also speak on that a little bit regarding the chemical composition of a lot of compostables. So anytime that you're wondering, like, how well will this break down in my backyard compost, you have to also understand that even though something says that it's compostable, almost all of these things have something called barrier coatings on them. Those are things that repel water. And what they're finding, there's a really interesting study that took many years to complete by the Center for Environmental Health. What they found is that they ran tests on several hundreds of compostable materials in the marketplace, and almost 70% of them contained PFAS. So it's really alarming, because we tend to think like, oh yeah, this is so great. And I actually used to be a rep for eco products, just like full disclosure. And I had a farm that we had these cups on our property, coming to our property, and they never broke down. So I have I'm a first person experiencer of these issues. But on the more concerning scale is for the health of our soil systems. Because if we're putting this stuff into even like a citywide compost system, like in Portland, Oregon, when they realized that a lot of these things, they created an ordinance where hospitals needed to use only compostable wares. And then they had a company come and collect these materials, chip them, and turn them into compost. And after a few years, when they tested their compost, they were like, uh-oh, we have really high levels of PFAS, because the feeder that they're putting in contains these contaminants. So like Faran is saying, right, it's still an item that needs mitigation. So I hope we kind of answered your question. And polyvinyl alcohol is a substitute that they're putting into these materials quite often.
So my question was, growing up, everything was in glass. I mean, what is the, she can hear me. Anyway, when I was knee high to a grasshopper, everything was in glass. And a lot of it, you could take it back to the store, they would recycle it, reuse it again. I mean, that's a corner that's never going to be reversed, or, I mean, I know some stores I go to, there are things that are in glass. So it must be weight, how it gets shipped, and obviously, things crack. So there's a lot of damage here. So maybe it doesn't pay for them to go back to glass. But if this is happening, and maybe it's a sensible alternative.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I mean, glass is certainly a much better option than plastic, because it's reusable by and large, and it's easier to recycle. And you can recycle glass over and over again, unlike plastic, which the plastic that can be recycled degrades in quality, so you can't turn it into the same item it was before. The problem, though, for businesses is that plastic is lightweight, so it's easy to transport, and it's cheap because the fossil fuels that go into it are cheap and plentiful. So it we've been flooded with single-use plastic products because of the cheapness of creating them and the ease of transport. So that's why they became pretty big, and the culture of disposability, of the convenience of being like, oh, I can just use this thing and toss it aside and never think about it again, seems easy. But now we're finding out that that has consequences. And so hopefully we can reverse that, go back to using reusable glass containers for beverages, for all sorts of stuff. There are ways we can incentivize that, things like bottle deposit bills, which certain states have done, where when you return your beverage container to a deposit location, you get 10, 15 cents back. States that have those programs, recycling rates, not just for containers, but for all items, skyrocket, because suddenly all these beverage containers are taken out of the waste stream. They're being collected separately. They can be reused by beverage companies. They can be recycled more easily. And now with all that waste out of the main waste stream, it becomes easier to deal with everything that's left over. So we might be a couple years away from a bottle deposit bill in Pennsylvania, but it's something we're working towards. It's a solution we know works, and hopefully we can get to incentivizing the use of reusable items more and more, like glass bottles, glass jars.
Are you saying that it's cheaper to make a glass bottle than plastic than glass?
It is much cheaper to make the plastic than the glass, yeah.
I have a question. Are there tax benefits for businesses that implement some of these processes? Do they get any, I don't know, write-offs, or, is there any benefit for them? If we're talking about like doing the cup and those types of processes.
So currently, there is a pollution prevention bill that has come down, and it's $6 billion that different governing agencies, like in Delaware County, it's the DVRC, that's going to be working with organizations like PennEnvironment, like ECHO, to help do those disbursements. So for example, like we are really targeting and trying to work with low-income businesses, because we don't want reuse to just be available for like the very wealthy. So we could then potentially apply for those grants, and then if we get the money, then we can siphon that money into our community by giving, say, like a $500 cash benefit or something, where you would have to invest that money into your reusable infrastructure or something like that. But from like the government, the very top, the federal level or the state level, no, those are not available yet. But hopefully, as we move forward, those things will become available.
So, sorry, back to your question about the cost of plastic. So if our gasoline that we put into our cars is like over $3 a gallon, how could plastic that, the same petroleum be so expensive? It's my impression that the petroleum that's used for plastics is actually a byproduct, and it's a way for the petroleum companies to make money out of a waste product that they can't use for gasoline?
Well, a lot of it is natural gas, fracked natural gas that we're extracting here in Pennsylvania, where there's millions, if not billions of dollars in tax breaks and subsidies for more natural gas fracking. And then the creation of... Yeah, we are. Also for facilities called cracker plants that will turn the gas into something that can become the plastic. So part of it is the natural gas extraction. We've had a natural gas boom in Pennsylvania and the fracking, and it's been severely damaging to our air, our climate, our water quality, mainly in western Pennsylvania. But a lot of that fracked natural gas goes to plastic creation. There are also incentives to create plastic products, or for facilities that might figure out ways to try and, magically, chemically recycle them. You might have heard of advanced recycling or chemical recycling, which is just another term for burning plastic. But part of the reason plastic is cheap is some of it's tax breaks and subsidies. Some of it is just the gas is plentiful. There's a lot of fracking happening. So.
That's all in the public record, so you can see like how much of Pennsylvania's money is going to support the beaver cracking plant or some of these other industries locally, including the incinerators.
I have something to say. It's funny talking into a microphone. I do have questions, but I'm going to email them to you. I just needed to say thank you so much for caring about this. Like, you guys are incredibly articulate, really knowledgeable, and I just appreciate that you care so much about it, Pennsylvanians, because obviously you probably care about your own families, but like, you don't know us and you care so much for us and all the generations that are coming after. So I just thank you so much for hosting these, and I wish I brought my entire neighborhood with me because this was great. I really didn't know what I was coming into, and I feel so informed, and just thank you so much for your dedication. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that there is a place, it's Fairless Hills Produce, that where you can get a bottle of milk, gallon bottle of milk, take it home, bring it back and get a refund. So we have one place. Oh, the McCaffrey's does it. Oh, okay. So we have two places. All right.
Bristol Farmers Market, Shady Grove.
Thank you. Yeah, the idea isn't new. The idea of reusing our containers has been around for decades, and it's what we did before plastic. So there are businesses that still try and do it. It's just for a lot of businesses, the plastic is cheap, and the reuse is another hassle they don't want to deal with. And that's just the way, we've pushed things as a society. So getting people to change back to reusing, encouraging more stores to do drop-offs for reusable bottles. There are stores that offer reusable containers for takeout or delivery, and then you bring the container back next time you go there. So it's a great way. These aren't new ideas. These are things that have been done for decades, but we just need to get people to do them again, do them more, pass legislation to make it easier to do or to incentivize people to do them.
I just wanted to make a comment that I think there was a lot of effort prior to COVID to do these reusable fill things. And then when COVID hit, it just seems like everything is wrapped in plastic now. Like, you can't find a coffee store at Wawa that isn't wrapped in plastic before it's plastic. That's the thing too. Like, our mentality really has shifted over the past 4 years where, we didn't worry about, everything being like so germaphobe, but then because of COVID, I think that we all just wanted everything wrapped up, and now we've got to kind of get back to the place where we can trust again.
I think that's in part true. I also think that that's why places like Middletown Township and the community that's sitting here, and then the extended community, anybody who might listen to this online, that's why this is really important, because the whole point of this from a municipal perspective is to pass the right type of ordinances and legislation to support businesses to not hyper pack everything, but help them figure out how to not do that. Help them to give them tools. Like right now, I'm working on a project called Philly Unwrapped. We have several stakeholders, including Clean Water Action. Several businesses in Philadelphia are working on it. We're building this toolkit for food service establishments so that what you're talking about will happen less and less when people start thinking and learning about, well, how do I keep people safe while also not making a mountain of garbage. So I think a lot of businesses, they might want to make the more progressive step, but they don't know where to start. They're not knowledgeable about materials. They're thinking about their bottom line, which is it is more expensive. Like, we should not fool ourselves. Like, doing the environmentally conscious thing is not gonna come cheaper. It's just not. And people who are like, oh, let me save you money overnight, it's a lie. because it's like an investment, like anything else, but it pays off over time because then you have this stock. And any food service establishments that anybody in here is connected with who's like, oh, I would do it, but I don't know how, please send them our way because we can provide them with that level of guidance.
I have a question. You talked about grocery stores on the panels. Like, what about paper bags? They have paper bags, but they never offer them unless somebody asks for it. Can't they just like offer them first and plastic second?
Well,
Is
and
it the
paper's
cost?
very expensive, yeah. So the grocery stores that we're working in, they spend on average of $10,000 to $15,000 a year just on paper bags. And they are constantly discouraging people from taking them by offering their boxes in like at Trader Joe's. When you go to Trader Joe's and they have the boxes, they do that because the plastic bags are so expensive. But also like creating incentivized services on like, hey, if you bring your own bag, we'll give you 5 cents or we'll give you a token that you can put towards an organization that you believe in. So there are ways to kind of work around it, but also saying like, we don't offer this anymore, like so many places have done, right? Like we no longer offer plastic bags, and if you want a paper bag, you have to pay for it. Like then all of a sudden people are thinking to themselves, oh, I'm gonna pay 15 cents every time I go to the store for everything, every bag I need, I better bring my own, which is another reason why ordinances work so well.
Yeah, and I can sort of expand upon that. I mean, plastic, again, is cheaper than paper. From an environmental perspective, though, paper is certainly better for our environment than plastic because you can recycle it, it biodegrades, but it still has a material cost. It still has a waste footprint, too. We have to do something with it. So from our perspective and an environmental and public health perspective, the reusable is really what you want to encourage the use of. So when we structure plastic bag bans, we want to get rid of the plastic bags because they're the worst option out there. But we also don't want people to replace the plastic one-to-one with paper bags because that's still creating a bunch of waste. So we, like Alisa just mentioned, want to include fees on those paper bags that stores charge, partly because it helps them cover the cost of those paper bags and switching from plastic to paper, but mainly because it serves as that reminder for you as a shopper to bring your own bag. So you're not saying, oh, 45 cents for 3 paper bags? I'll just bring my own bags with me, or I'll make sure I stash them in a backpack, in a purse, in a car, in the hallway, so I never forget them. Or, you know, I'll just bring stuff directly to my car and dump them in there, or I'll use a crate and carry that with me. I'll have a basket. All these different solutions to avoid getting that single-use bag. So that's what we're trying to do, flip that switch in people's minds from, I should use that single-use option and I'll find the best single-use option, to let me just reuse something over and over and over again and use fewer bags and use fewer single-use. And then you might think, oh, I'll bring a reusable bottle for my water instead of getting a water bottle. Or I'll try and bring a thermos to the coffee shop so I don't need to get a single-use coffee cup. I'll bring a Tupperware container with me to a restaurant to put my leftovers in so I don't need to get one of their containers. The list sort of goes on and on and on of ways you can take action. You just have to start thinking about the reusability. And a plastic bag ban is a great first step on the road to that because you can get people thinking about the reusable bags when they go shopping and reusing stuff when they go shopping and reducing their footprint. So.
For those of us with white hair, for myself, I mean, I remember growing up in this area when Levittown was built. We all had a milkman who delivered milk to every one of our houses. And they were all in glass containers. And you always put the container in the, when you were done, you put it in the container in the box right outside the front door, and the milkman picked it up and brought it back. With COVID, we all got to the point where going to the grocery store became a different experience then. And we saw delivery begin to come back. I mean, all of that delivery stuff went away years ago. And now it started to come back. We see these food trucks now delivering to the houses again. And it seemed to me that that's part of half the model. That if you can get to some kind of reused container, there's maybe a mechanism for it to go back without having, for you personally, to truck it back and forth from the store. And I wonder if anybody's using that model yet.
There definitely are people doing that model of reuse. I guess we can call it a milkman model. There are also just ways to work around it. So like I know someone who gets groceries delivered from Walmart. She drives in her car to the Walmart, they bring the groceries out to her car, puts them in her bags, and then she just can reuse those bags over and over again. And so even though she's not actually doing the shopping, she uses reusable bags. And that's something that can be done. Or there are ways to do it with grocery delivery or for takeout and delivery. There are all sorts of businesses that are trying new things or experimenting with them. We just sort of need to encourage it. And you definitely have.
Yes, so there's actually, depending on where geographic location is, I don't think that they come out this way, but in Philly, and they just got like a multi-million-dollar grant, or an investment, I should say. They're called the Rounds. And the Rounds is a model like what you're talking about, where you would go online to do your shopping for everyday goods like shampoo or conditioner or laundry soap or greens or something like this. I don't know if they deal too much in perishables, but for like the staple goods, you could go online, you could order them, they would pack them in the reusable, they would deliver them to your home, oftentimes on a bicycle, which is really cool. You would use those items, and then say you needed to refill your rice or you needed to refill, you would take the container that they came in, you would put them in the bag, you would leave it at your front doorstep, they pick it up, they refill it, they bring it back to you in their next cycle round. So I think that those models do exist. They are pretty new and they're in the process of growing, but unfortunately they're not like in every town.
I have been using glass containers for all my things, foodstuffs for a long time. They all have plastic lids, though. And, I'm not sure exactly how that can be replaced because the glass is great. But I also get stuff from, like I just got an order from Amazon, and they send it in those bags. Those bags are not good then either, because they're plastic basically, right? Yeah.
I mean, Amazon's a whole can of worms that we can open up if we want. But yeah, there are containers that are reusable made of plastic. It's probably not as good as a glass container, and I certainly wouldn't microwave anything in a reusable plastic container. But if it's durable and can be reused, that's still good. Yeah, like if the lid to your glass container is made of plastic, but you reuse it and you keep using that over and over and over again, that's better than a single-use plastic because it is reusable and it's not becoming waste. There are alternatives, like you could have an aluminum lid or you could have a glass lid or something like that, but that's not the biggest problem out there. In terms of companies like Amazon that do a lot of shipping, by design that is single-use, that packaging is single-use and is meant to be thrown away. And there are some companies that are trying to reduce their packaging waste for shipping. There's a lot of efforts out there. There are also legislative efforts to cut into the packaging done by producers of the goods. So it's called extended producer responsibility or producer responsibility, where rather than a consumer having to figure out what to do with all the plastic packaging that can't be recycled and is going to end up harming our environment, the onus would be on the people producing the waste to figure out how to deal with it or to pay into systems. Things like lead paint, batteries, all these, rugs, all these items that can be toxic in our waste stream, the producers of them actually have to, spend money and put parts into ways to dispose of them sustainably. And so producer responsibility laws are a way to sort of make that for plastic packaging. They're expanding around the country. There have been some passed in the last year. We're certainly a little ways away from it in Pennsylvania, but that's one way to cut into the packaging waste from something like Amazon. But another way is just as an Amazon customer to talk to Amazon. You as a customer can call them up and say, please, please, please reduce your packaging. And enough people call Amazon to say, please, please, please reduce your packaging. It could have an impact on them because they are a company, and so they're driven by profit. They're so big, it's difficult with them, much more difficult than a smaller business, like a local business. So my advice is often try and shop local when you can, where you can control what your packaging is going to be, where you can control how much waste is going to be there, do it. But there is so much out of our control, and that's where legislation needs to step in, because there's a limit to what each and every one of us can do as an individual to reduce our waste footprint, and so that's where we need to pass laws that reduce it.
Do you have a list of laws or legislation that is coming up that people can contact their representatives in order to encourage them to vote for those types of things?
I don't know if we have a one unified list of all the bills, because a legislative session in Pennsylvania, it runs 2 years. Anything not passed disappears and has to get reintroduced all over again. But I have a way to sign up for PennEnvironment's Mobile Action Network, where we text people about bills that are moving or about ways to let your representative know about them. We have actions on our website. You can check that out to see what bills are happening at the state level. You can also get in contact with us, and we're happy to tell you about, this is a bill that's moving. There's a bill to increase funding for recycling programs in Pennsylvania. It passed through its committee in the House. It's waiting a full floor vote. And so that's something you could contact your state representative about, stuff like that. So all that information are ways to get involved. It's on PennEnvironment's website. You could follow our Mobile Action Network or get our email list or something as a way to keep track of it too. But you can also just email me directly and I can help.
Is there a list of companies that are doing the right things?
I think that I don't think there is comprehensive lists per se, because the right thing can be kind of arbitrary, right? But as far as there being like a list of zero waste businesses, I know that Circular Philadelphia does have something on their website that has a list of some different reuse companies or waste reduction companies that make that a focus. But I think that nationally, that's really hard to come by. Locally, it would really depend on a local authority to take its time to do something like that. But I don't think there's anything comprehensive out there that I know of.
Some communities have done sustainable business certifications where you create a system and businesses that are doing the right thing can put a little green certified or sustainability certified or waste reduction certified in their window. And so EACs or other environmental boards have done stuff like that. It creates a little way to recognize businesses that are doing their part, but it should usually function in tandem with legislation, having the businesses make the changes and getting them to do the right thing too.
And also from a safety and a safe chemistry perspective, there is a platform called, I think it's called Green Screen. It's called Green Screen Certification. It's probably the top quality certifier for products. So if you're looking to produce a new compostable cup, you would want it to have the Green Screen certification because they have the highest standard, where something like BPI certified, I'm not sure if I have as much confidence in that certification, but they're coming out with more high quality certifying agencies that use safe chemistry basically in manufacturing their goods. And you could go to their websites and see what they are. And like I mentioned before, the Center for Environmental Health, they do have a comprehensive list of all of the compostable wares that have been tested, and it indicates which ones contain PFAS. So if you're wondering if you have a food service establishment and I want to use this product, you could go there and kind of cross-reference to see if that product is safe.
So this is another can of worms, but how about the clothing industry? There's so much plastic clothing now.
Yeah, fast fashion and the fashion industry is a big source of plastic waste that ends up in our environment. I'm pretty sure of the 100 waterways, the 100 plus waterways we've tested for microplastics in Pennsylvania, every single one had microplastic fibers from synthetic textiles in them. We create a lot of clothing. A lot of the clothing breaks down pretty quickly. A lot of it's made from synthetic fabrics, like rayon, nylon, stuff like that, polyester especially. And that, when you wash it, when you wear it, it sheds plastic fibers into the environment. So we have campaigns targeting certain fast fashion brands to try and get them not to send their overstock clothing, the stuff they can't sell, try and get them not to send it to a landfill or to an incinerator. We encourage people not to buy so much clothing. If your clothing gets a hole in it, try and repair it. Try and make it last as long as possible. Try and avoid the synthetic fabric. But again, there is a limit to what we can do as individuals. I'm sure some of the clothing I'm wearing has synthetic fibers in it because it's just really difficult to avoid. So you could call on companies to create less clothing, not to burn their overstock. We have plenty of resources for that on the PennEnvironment website or Environment America's website. But it's also about, trying to find durable, non-synthetic clothing. That's an option. Shopping local, again, is an option there. Or trying to get legislation passed to increase standards for clothing, or to try and produce less clothing, or to try and tackle the microplastic fiber problem. There's a lot of stuff out there that's being done because it is a big problem. And it is, again, a whole nother can of worms we could go into.
So if anybody here has fibers that are like cottons that you don't want anymore, there's a really cool company called Fab Scrap. And I think there's another, maybe Retriever. They might collect your fibers, but synthetic fibers are not recyclable. So even though you can take it and you can, it can be melted down into, say, like a fleece jacket, the more times that you're doing that, it's degrading, and you still have to add virgin materials. So like if you wanted to take some synthetic fibers and turn it into something like a nice jacket, you would have to feed it with virgin materials to make that happen. And a lot of companies use this material as like carpet backing or something like this, maybe airplane carpeting, or, so it's still getting use. They're always trying to find new innovations on how to deal with these materials, but the best thing to do is just buy less of it.
Great question. It is on the YouTube channel at Middletown Township. So after this show, after this presentation ends, we'll load it on the Middletown YouTube channel, okay? And then you could watch the whole thing over and over again. Be bigger than Taylor Swift's show. Are there any other questions? Folks, a big round of applause for our speakers tonight. We want them to come back.